说话，如果方便的话。
已经洗过脸了，没脸见人。下节课。
然后如果方便的话，然后另外那个甜甜应该在吧？甜甜，甜甜
啊，我在，
在吗？
我在。
对，我想请你帮忙做一个事儿。如果一会儿还有人就是我把你加成这个联席主持人，一会儿有人进来的话，你来就是在右上角，就是你看那个can start。
Cool. Okay, let's do it. I want to show you a very funny thing before we start. First of all, it's so nice to be back with you all. So it's been kind of a while, and thank you. And I put a whole bunch of time into preparing, hopefully, what will be an interesting class. But I do want to say one thing. A very funny thing happened here. I was cleaning up my house, starting to get ready for Passover cleaning, and I found last night, just before our class today, I found two things that I had bought when I was in China. Now, can you tell me what it actually says? I hope it says something nice and it's not something I should.
哇哦，毛主席，不要挖社会主义墙角。
Oh, where did you get this book?
I bought it in a bookstore in I forgot the name of the city. It's just outside of Shanghai. There's a beautiful lake there. Hangzhou.
Hangzhou,
yes. But does anybody know what it says? I certainly don't. No? And it
don't make the wall the wall of socialism collapsed.
Okay, but how about on this side?
Don't take advantage of the socialism.
Okay. Anyways, it's a little notebook, and I loved it because the paper is so nice. So I used to use it all the time, and now I found it. Here's another thing I hope you'll find funny. I find it very interesting. Another trip when I was in China, I saw this little book you might be familiar with. And the reason I bought it is because, hold on 1 minute.
毛主席语录
If I figure I have to wear red glasses if I'm looking at this book, right? So,
It's so red. Okay.
I can't wear blue. It only works with red. So I bought this book because when I was in the store, I opened it up. I thought it was really kind of cool, but I read it because it's the official government translation into English. And I'm looking at this, and again, I don't know what the Chinese says. I wish I did, but I don't. But here's what it says in the translation right at the very beginning. It says, the theoretical basis guiding our thinking is Marxism, Leninism. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really interesting. Because as we will talk about in the class today, nothing is born out of nothing. Everything is born from something. So if this book, in part, was born of the Marxism, forget Leninism for a minute, but Marxism, so Karl Marx, where was he born from? So if you go back, Karl Marx's, both of his grandfathers were actually very famous rabbis. And Karl Marx, even though he didn't grow up religious and was anti-religious, which I can understand why he was, but nonetheless, he came in his blood, in his soup, he came from a world of Talmud, Jewish teaching. So what I started to do, but I just ran out of time, unfortunately, but what I started to do, here, give you like a little example, I started going through the whole book, and I thought it must be, here, like, for example, I would put a little footnote here just for myself, and then I would put it in the note down here, and then I turned it into my book. But I started reading this book, and I found that hundreds of ideas in this book are all found in the Talmud. So I thought it'd be really cool someday, unless of course I would go to jail if I did it, but I thought it'd be really cool to do a little book called the Talmudic Origins of the Little Red Book. So I don't know, maybe we'd have to make it like blue for like the Israeli flag or something. I don't know. Anyhow, I just thought it's very funny that these two things suddenly popped up right before a class today. So I took that as a sign that I should share that with you as well. So there we go. All right, enough of that silliness. So here we go. So I'm going to start off this, you know what, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about the overall arch of what we want to do in the class today. We're going to talk about, obviously, birthdays, and we're going to talk about life before birth, and then we're going to talk about different impacts that impact us when we are born. Just some of them. I mean, there are long, long things, even going into birthmarks and things of this nature, which we're not really going to get into, but we'll just call them factors at birth, including a person's name, the power of a name, and the name, because it is sound, kind of like Eckankar, it relates to the neshama, right? Because in Hebrew, the word neshama, which is the soul, the middle two letters of the word soul is the word name. So the connection of the soul and the name a person gets. Then birthdays that were actually talked about in the Bible, in the Torah, life events, and then even death, which is obviously part of birth. Because at the end of the day, the only thing a person who is born, as King Solomon said, the only thing when you bring a child into the world, you guarantee them only two things. One, they will pay taxes, and the other is that they will die. And maybe taxes you can get out of, but the last one, you know, we're all sentenced to life. Nobody gets out alive. The only question is, what do you do while you are alive? And that's an interesting question, because the Talmud tells a story of a person who comes to a port city, and in the port city are these two huge boats, and one boat has a large party going on. A lot of people are there celebrating the boat, and he notices the other boat, nobody's even paying any attention to the other boat. So he asks one of the people who works at the port, he says, why is everyone at this boat? And he says, well, this boat is about to set sail. It's going to go on a big journey. It's never gone on the water before. And in the Western world, we call it christening. They're going to break a bottle on the front of the boat and celebrate and say, bon voyage. And this boat's going to go off, and everybody is all excited. The other boat, he says, that boat just arrived. It came back from a very, very long voyage. So he said, really, you know, it should be the other way. The boat that's about to go out, why are you celebrating? You have no idea what could happen. The boat could be in 3 days hit by lightning and everybody gets killed, they get drowned, or nobody knows what's going to happen. But the other boat that nobody is celebrating, everybody should be celebrating, because at the end of the day, you see it made it back. It completed its journey. It's here. It did something. It's here. And so the analogy of the Talmud is, it's very funny that on one hand, we celebrate when, and we should, when a baby is born, but we cry when a person dies. But really, it could in a certain way be the other way. When a baby is born, I mean, okay, for sure we're happy and it's exciting, but it should be filled with a little concern. Who is this person? What will this person grow up to be? What will this person do? And on the other hand, when a person dies, well, of course we're sad, but if they die at a very old age and they lived a very full life, we should have a level of joy because they succeeded in making something out of their life. So Steven Spielberg, many years ago, made a remake of a very famous TV show called The Twilight Zone. And he made some of his own episodes. And one episode he made, which I'm using here because I thought it was very relevant, is a scene in Europe in the late 1800s. And it's a woman dressed up at night with whatever, cold, raining. She's running. She's banging, holding a lantern, banging on the door of somebody. And you see a light get lit in the house, and the door opens, and it's a man in his pajamas, and he's half asleep. And the woman screams, my baby, he's dying. You have to come. And this man was the doctor in this little European village. So he puts his coat and his hat, and he grabs his medical bag, and he comes with her, and they're walking through the rain. He gets to the house, and there's the baby, and he starts to put hot presses on him and all sorts of things. And he's working until finally it's the morning. And you know how Spielberg does these things. So the light comes in through the window, and you see the mother has fallen asleep. Obviously, this was going on all night. And the doctor has been up all night, and he's shaking the mother very gently. And she jumps up and she looks at him. And he says to her, you don't have to worry, Mrs. Hitler. Your little baby is fine. And of course, there's a heavy message in that story, because when the doctor came to save little baby Hitler, he had no idea what a monster this person would grow up to be. And yet, look what he did. He saved this person who went on to kill millions and millions and millions of people, either directly or indirectly, through the Japanese occupation of China. But certainly millions of people around the world died because of this one man. So this is the irony that the Talmud talks about, that we get all excited about a birthday or the birth of a baby. And on the other hand, we don't really know where or what the baby should be or could be, as opposed to when a person fulfills their life. Now, and to add to that, the Talmud goes and asks another question. Who should really celebrate a birthday, the baby or the mother? Because the mother actually risked her life for the baby. In Jewish law, when a mother gives birth, she is in mortal danger. Her life is on the line. This is why a woman who gives birth, or a Jewish woman who gives birth, is allowed to go in an ambulance on Shabbat, even though normally we do not drive. You can do anything to violate Shabbat or Yom Kippur to give her food, because this person is giving her life. Now, if you think about that, I'm imagining everyone in this class has or has had a mother. None of us were born out of a test tube, not yet. So we had a mother. So no matter what we think about our mother, the fact is, this woman, this person, gave or was ready to give her life for you. That's a huge thing. We get engaged in emotional and personality issues when dealing with our parents. Oh, I don't like my father, I don't like my mother, or my mother is whatever or whatever. These things really don't matter. If you are a humble person and you are a person who appreciates what another person does for you, then the mere fact that your mother was willing to give her life for you to be born means that you should feel, we should feel, everyone should feel indebted to this woman forever. How could you ever repay somebody who saves your life? It's a big thing. So really, maybe a birthday should be for the mother, because she remembers the fact that she was willing to give her life for the baby. So it's not so simple how a birthday actually should be celebrated or not celebrated. In fact, the Talmud tells a very interesting thing. I'm going to just read you this little passage I translated into English. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the People's Talmud, you can find it online. It's not in Chinese yet. Notice the word yet, but it is in English. And this is an interesting story. The Talmud says as follows. It's talking about the praise of one's mother. So the Talmud says that Samuel, that is Samuel in the days of the Talmud, not the biblical image of Samuel. He praised his student, Rabbi Yehuda, saying that Rabbi Yehuda was so holy, it was if he was not born from a woman. Now that's a very interesting compliment, because it makes it sound, God forbid, as if a woman is a negative thing. We're actually going to see a little later in the class that a woman is more positive than a man, but we'll save that for right now. But it makes it sound that by saying it's as if he was not born from a woman, makes it sound like being born from a woman, a woman is a negative thing. And that can't be, because there are many examples in the Talmud when certain people reached tremendous high levels of spiritual being, and the Talmud says, fortunate is the mother. Now, this is interesting, because in Jewish law, the father is responsible for teaching his son Torah. Yet the question then is, why is, if the son becomes a great scholar, why is the praise given to the mother when the father was the one that had to educate him? And the answer is a very important issue in education, that the father is obligated in formal education, but there's a more important type of education than formal education. It's called emotional education. And a child, when he or she is very young, develops emotional education from the mother. Because when the child's very little and breastfeeding, or even when it's still inside its mother, or certainly very, very little and completely with its mother, that child is learning on a vibrational level how to look at the world. Did mommy get scared? Is mommy upset? Is mommy always happy? Is mommy always feeling good? And those energies are training the child how he or she will respond to different situations when they grow up. It's true. The father will then come when the child is 5 years old or 6 years old and begin with the education. But the foundation of a person's education is his emotional education, which is given to him by his mother. And that's why when a Jewish man, a Yotairen, becomes a very holy person and becomes a sage, the complement of success is given to the mother. So why, if the Talmud gives so much honor to the mother, why would this rabbi compliment this man and say, you are as if you were born not of a woman? And so the Talmud answers that what he was referring to is that there actually was one person who was born not from a mother. Actually, two people, but they were born at the same time because they were originally created as one, and that is Adam and Eve were created by God. So that's what he meant. He simply meant that this man had become so holy and so spiritual, it's as if the person was created directly by God, even though, of course, he had a mother, and of course, a mother is something that is deserving of tremendous honor. So let's take a look for a minute at what is it like before we are born, at least according to the Talmud. So there are many things in the level of a child when he or she is still inside their mother. There are two major factors that are going on. There are legal issues and there are spiritual issues. The legal issues, for example, can include abortion. Is abortion murder? Is killing a baby in the fetus still in the womb, is that called murder? I mean, is that a human being? Does that thing have legal rights? So in the Talmud, there are variations as to the stages of the embryo that will answer that on a legal front. For example, from the moment that the sperm and the egg fertilize in creation of a child, for the first 40 days, that is called a fish. It's not even called a person. So therefore, many times, if there are valid reasons to perform an abortion, then it would be preferable if it's performed within the first 40 days before it starts to actually become human. Now, this is hinted at, and I hope this won't be too difficult to understand because it ties into Hebrew. But the word for a baby in its mother in Hebrew is called Vlad. It's not the Russian word for the name Vladimir. It's not Vladimir, very famous name these days in the world. It's just called Vlad. And Vlad means the baby when it's in the mommy, the embryo. Vlad in Hebrew has the numerical value of 40. That's why it's not really called a human for the first 40 days. 40 is always a number in Hebrew that indicates the creation of life. 40 days and 40 nights that the rain came down on the flood of Noah. Many, many examples of 40, the volume of water that makes what's called a mikvah, a body of water through which a person purifies themselves, has to have 40 saw, which is a certain type of measurement. But 40 always is a number that represents the beginning of real life. Now watch this. This word Vlad, which is given to the baby when it's 40 days old, at the moment of birth, birth is called Leda. Vlad and Leda are the same root. And when the child now comes out, in Hebrew, the word for child is Yeled. So from the 40th day of conception, in the birthing process, and then a child until the ages of 12 or 13 is all the same word. Why? Because unlike an animal, when an animal is born, that's it. It's an animal. The thing is there. It's only going to get bigger, but it's not going to be different. It's just going to become more of that animal. But a human being is not just simply born and there it is. The human being only is no longer an animal once wisdom comes into them. Now they have the ability to choose between good and bad. Animals choose based on instinct, but humans have the ability to rise up over their instinct and to be smarter than maybe what their animal tendencies would tell them to be. So therefore, in Hebrew, the word to be a human being is when you have a crown on your head of wisdom. Until then, you're just a child. And that's why some people, you know, remain children. You could meet people who have reached 60, 70, 80 years old, but they're children. They get angry really easy. They look down at other people. They speak badly about other people. They get upset if you don't do things the way. That's a child. They never grew up. They never became a human being. And that's impacted on the second aspect of what goes on inside the womb. So for that, I'm going to just read you another passage here from the Talmud. It says, the Talmud says that the happiest days of a person's life are actually in the womb. The Talmud describes the fetus like a closed book resting on the table. Its hands are by the side of its head. Its arms are along its ankles. Its heels are up against its backside, and its head is between its knees. Its umbilical cord is open, but its mouth is closed because it eats what its mother eats. That's why a pregnant woman should be very careful not to drink alcohol, and just to drink healthy food, because the baby is eating what the mother eats. And the baby, no matter what it eats, it does not produce waste. It does not go to the bathroom while it's inside its mother, because that would put the mother's life in danger. The moment it is born, however, its mouth opens and the belly button, where the umbilical cord was, is now closed. And the Talmud says that while it's in its baby's mother's womb, there is a candle that is put on the head of the baby, allowing it to see from one end of the world to the other. This means that the software for every human being that is born in this world is spiritually downloaded into their very bones and body that they are being made in. That a person has inside of them a total knowledge as to why they are coming into this world, what their job is to do in this world, and what a beautiful, amazing place this world is. However, at the moment that the child is about to be born, there is an angel that sits with this child and teaches this child all of the wisdom of life. And at the very moment before the child is born, the angel makes the child take a vow, to take an oath. And the child vows that he or she will be a righteous person in this world. And then, of course, if God forbid a person does not succeed at reaching that vow, that's something you have to deal with when you check out, upstairs, going back upstairs, and they kind of say, well, look, you did take the vow. Is this really what you did with your life? But at that point, when the baby is born, everything that the baby learned is forgotten. So the question is, if the baby is going to forget about the candle, forget about the wisdom, what's the whole purpose in the exercise? The answer is, and all of us know this, sometimes somebody can say something to you that you never heard in your life. But you say, you know what? That sounds true. Now, how can it sound true? You never heard it before. The answer is because wisdom is in your bones. Knowledge of life and the blessing of life is in your soul. So even if the mind has forgotten, the soul of the person remembers. And therefore, there's something inside of us that is always struggling to grow and to become the person that we really wish to be. There's something about us that makes us feel that I don't want to wake up tomorrow the same person I was yesterday. I want to be a better person. I want to be a wiser person. I want to look at the new day as a golden opportunity to be able to be something more in a positive way than I have been. So that's the whole idea of how we view life in the mother's womb. Now, having said all of that, there's another interesting couple of little factors as to fetus rights, baby rights, while they're still in their mother. For example, in Jewish law and in many laws in the world today, children have a legal right to inherit their parents. The parents die, they leave an estate, and the estate is divided up among children. I believe in Chinese culture, I could be mistaken, it's very much like Jewish culture, and that is that the first child gets a double portion. The firstborn gets a double portion, and all of the other children get a single portion. Now, here's a question. What if a mother has, let's say, 5 children, and she is pregnant, and the father dies before the baby is born? The baby is more than 40 days old, so it's called a human, but it hasn't been born yet. And now the father dies. Is the baby considered part of the inheritance? Is the baby considered a 6th child? And the Talmud says, yes, except it cannot diminish the double portion of the firstborn. But whatever else is left over, it shares equally with all of those other children. Let's take another example. Let's say, actually, I was going to save this for later, but since I just thought of it now, I'll just say it now. I was going to talk about later in the class, I was going to talk about the idea, do dead people have birthdays? Right? We have a remembering of the day they died, but what about birthdays? Do people who die still have birthdays? So this actually comes up in the Talmud in a very practical law as follows. If, God forbid, a man rapes a girl, meaning in Jewish law, that would mean a lady under the age of 12. So when the court catches this man, there are many things and punishments that a rapist will suffer, but part of them is paying financial compensation, among many things, causing pain, embarrassment, many things. But one of the things is financial compensation. Now, a child, until they reach maturity, for example, let's say an 8-year-old Jewish boy, in Jewish law at least, if he finds something in the street and he picks it up, he cannot own it. It automatically belongs to his father until he becomes his own man, and then it's his. So if the girl was raped, God forbid, at, let's say, under the age of 12, so the payments go to her father. Now, what happens is that the payments are chosen from the time that the court finds the man guilty, not from the time when the event occurred. So that, let's say, God forbid, she was raped at 12, and by the time the court case finished, she was now older than 12. Well, even though she was raped before as a child, now she's older than 12, she's an adult, she would get the payments. But what happens if now, let's say, that she was raped, and before the court finished the case, she dies? But by the time the court finished the case, had she been alive, she would be considered an adult. So the court says, no, we do track her life even though she's dead. So even though she died, at this time, had she been alive, she would be an adult and she would get the money. So in this case, because she's dead, those children or those people who would have inherited her, they would receive the money instead of the father. Just an example of a strange concept of one's birthday continuing on, if you will, even after they have passed away. But let's come back now to the next point in the class, and that is factors at the time of birth. So one of the big factors at the time of birth is actually the day that a person is born on. And I'm going to just read you here from another passage in the Talmud, and you could pay attention, especially when it's the day you were born. But you have, for example, the Talmud says that on Sunday, we call Yom Rishon, a person who's born on Sunday may tend to be an extremist, either for good or for bad. Somebody born on Monday may have anger issues. A person born on Tuesday has the potential to become either very rich or, God forbid, sexually immoral. A person born on Wednesday can become very wise and can glow from their wisdom. A person born on Thursday tends to be kind-hearted, somebody who does good for other people. A person born on Friday tends to be a very busy person, while a person born on Shabbat has the potential for greatness and holiness. Then Talmud goes on further. Not only is the day of the week an influence, but even the hour of the day is an influence. And so it says that a person who is born on the hour when the sun has its greatest influence will have a glowing personality, will be self-sufficient, but everybody will know this person's secrets, and he will fail if he tries to become a thief because he'll just get caught. If a person is born when the planet of Venus has its hour in the day, such a person has great potential for becoming rich or sexually immoral. If it's during the hour of Mercury, they have the potential to become wise and to glow. And if it's the power during the time of the moon, they will be prone to suffering. They will either be a builder or a destroyer, but they will be a good thief because they know how to hide their secrets. A person who is born in the hour of Saturn will either have all of his plans fail, or all of the plans of other people against him will fail. And a person who is born in the month of Jupiter will become righteous, moral, and charitable, while a person born under the hour of Mars will become a fighter. So that's something in terms of, like, let's say, factors that go into influencing our lives. Now, the other thing that's really maybe more important than all of this is the naming of a child. According to Jewish tradition, when you name a child, there is one of two decisions that are made. One, are you naming the child in the honor of somebody who has died? I'm sorry, it's if a person is naming the child after somebody who has died, then why are they doing it? Are they doing it because the person who died was a very great person, and now you want to bring that greatness from the higher world into the baby? Or perhaps the person who died was not such a good person, and now you want to give the baby the chance to rectify that person who's no longer alive. Now the baby, by growing up and becoming a righteous person, can rectify the situation of that soul that is in another world. Now, I don't want to go into teaching Kabbalah, but let's just take a look at this, because I mentioned it before, this idea of the word for name as the middle word letters in the word in Hebrew for soul. In Hebrew, neshama is the word for soul. Neshama is connected to the word neshima, which means to breathe. The only difference between them is that in breath, the little letter yud is pushed into the middle of the word. In other words, it's like the breath of God that comes into the soul that puts it in the body, right? Because what are we really? We are physical, and inside is our soul. Now, I mean, when I was in China, I saw amazing balloons. I saw balloons that people had made into animals, and it was amazing. But the one thing I noticed about a balloon, anywhere in the world, if you put a hole in it, all the air goes out. So how come, if we have a soul which is even higher than air, why doesn't it come out of our ears or our nose or our mouth? How does the soul stay inside? It's not a balloon without holes. There are holes here. I mean, there are a lot of holes, but like there are holes here. Like even your skin has holes. How does the soul stay inside? Because God tells it to. God says, here, you're going to live in this apartment building for however many years, and I'm going to give you all these different things. I'm going to either make you a man, or I'm going to make you a woman, or I'm going to make you Chinese, or I'm going to make you black, or I'm going to make you whatever. God makes all of us. There aren't two gods, only one God who makes all of us. And that God loves all of us. And the more we realize that God loves all of us, the quicker we will get rid of war in the world, which is why women are a more advanced evolutionary creation than men. Because if and when women will rule the world, we probably will have no more war. Because men are the ones that fight war, and women are the ones that create life. So if we realize that the soul is a gift inside of our body, and we are blessed with this life, then somehow the nature of the name, right? If you're familiar, I mentioned it before with Eckankar. Eckankar is all about sound and vibrations. And the whole creation of the world is through sound and vibrations because God spoke. It doesn't mean that God has a mouth, God forbid. It means that God used the tool of vibrations to bring things into the world. Something which is a gas has very fast molecular movement. It's moving at a very high speed. If it slows down, it becomes a liquid. If it gets really slow, it becomes a solid. But it's always molecules, atoms moving all around. And when you can go ping and hit that with sound, that sound sets a whole vibration into the world. If you make a blessing and you bless somebody, you put vibrations of growth and holiness into the world. In the same way, in a negative form, God forbid, if you say something very negative, or God forbid, if you curse another person, you bring arrows into the world. And the problem with cursing another person is if the person you cursed is not deserving of the curse, then the curse is going to come back to the person who said it. A friend of mine once said, he said, always make sure that the words that you speak are sweet, because you never know which ones you may eat. So that idea of the name is between two letters, nun and hey. These two letters in Hebrew are 55. 55 is a number that represents the spectrum of creation. For example, God creates the world in 10 utterances. When people could no longer hear those 10 utterances, God had to shake up the world with the 10 plagues of Egypt. Once God shaked up the world and people could hear again, God then spoke the 10 commandments. But the first 10 utterances are the building blocks of all of creation that we live in. In Jewish tradition, there are 180,000 other planets with intelligent life. We're not the only ones, even though we like to think we are. But it doesn't matter. We're the only ones that matter in terms of what we're doing here. So that number 55 is really an easy number. Watch this. If you have 55 and you have 10 levels, so 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 3 is 6, 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 5 is 15, 15 plus 6 is 21, 21 plus 7 is 28, 28 plus 8 is 36, 36 plus 9 is 45, plus 10 is 55. So the number 55 represents the development of these 10 utterances of creation. They represent the 10 sphere, they represent the 5 worlds of creation, the hay, and they represent the 50th gate of wisdom, the doorway to the infinite. And between the worlds of creation and the infinite, in the middle, is your name. And in your name is all the data of everything you do in your life. That's why when you leave this world, you leave the body in the parking lot, right? The grave. But the soul comes out. And all of the data of who you are is rooted in your name. This is why, by the way, God forbid a person should never need to know this, but if a person is very sick, one of the things we do is we change their name. Because when you change the name, you are literally rebooting new software inside of this person. It's almost to say, well, that decree from heaven that this person should be sick, that person is not that person anymore. That person's this person, brand new bank account. So that's how powerful a person's name is. Now, who are the two people in the Bible that mention that the Bible, or we call Torah, is mentioning their birthdays? So interestingly enough, in the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, the Chumash, we call it in Hebrew, Chumash from the word Chamesh, 5, there are only 2 times that a person's birth is actually mentioned. One of them is Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and the other one is Moshe, Moses, Musa. And these two are really interesting because, first of all, we know from the stories in the Bible that they're the ones that went head to head. Moses comes in and Pharaoh resists, and they're the ones with the 10 plagues. But if we really remember, we know that Moses and Pharaoh were best friends. They grew up as children in the house of the father Pharaoh together. They loved each other. And the fact that Moses had to destroy Egypt was a very, very painful thing for Moshe. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't vive la révolution. It was about pain because he desperately wanted his brother, Pharaoh, to wake up and not allow this horrible situation to wake up. And look what he's doing to the citizens in his country. Look at how he has stripped away their civil rights. Look at what he does that they die in large numbers. Look at what he does to force them to be the working power while the echelon becomes rich. That's Egypt. Egypt comes in many forms, even till today. And when a person doesn't realize that, then God has to step in to wake them up. And that's what happened, the whole conflict there. So you had one of them, Pharaoh, who is the most arrogant person there is. Who is God that I should answer to him? And in contrast, you have Moshe, who's the most humble person who ever lived. As the Torah calls him, the most humble person who ever lived. So what is this idea? So the idea is that there are two things you can do with your birthday. Your birthday can all be about me. I don't even have to say thank you to my mom. It's about me. And in many societies, what happens on a birthday? Everybody comes to the birthday child and gives him a present. That's Pharaoh. You know what in religious Jewish homes they do on birthday? The little boy or the little girl, when all of the friends come, he or she gives them gifts. He doesn't take gifts, he gives gifts. He says, I'm so happy to be alive. I'm so thankful that God has given me another year to become a bigger, better person. And I'm so happy you are my friends. Let me say thank you to you for being my friends. That's like the difference between Pharaoh and Moshe. Just a question of what do you do with your life? Is it all about me? Or, it's funny, in English, the word me is written M-E. And if you take the letter M and turn it upside down, it becomes a W, which spells the word we. So you can either look at everything as about me, or you can look at it, it's all about we. There was a wonderful rabbi, unfortunately passed away a little over a year ago from London, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And somebody asked him, how do you define being humble? And he said, humble is not about making yourself less than you are. Many people think it is. They become very humble. That's called weak. Humble is not about making yourself less than you are. Humble is about thinking less about yourself. That's what humble is. Not always thinking about yourself. Think about others. Think about how they feel. Think about your mother. Are you taking good care of her? Do you appreciate that she gave you life? That's humble. Because, I think we said this once in one of our classes, there's a word in English for somebody who's filled with themselves. We say in English, they have a very big ego. Ego is 3 letters, E-G-O. It stands for edging, which is a nice way of saying pushing God out. A person who's filled with ego has no room for God because they're God. What do I need God for? I'm the guy. Whereas a humble person is like filled with God because they realize everything they have is a blessing from God. And that's the contrast the Torah shows us. What do we do with our life? You know, I remember once a friend of mine is a rabbi. He was giving a class in New York. And there were some very, very wealthy Jewish people there at this event. And there was one guy smoking like a big Cuban cigar, you know, really like, you know, Mr. Important. So my friend, who's a troublemaker, decided he's going to go over to this guy. He goes over. He says, "Excuse me, sir." And he noticed that the guy had come with his two teenage boys. He says, are those your children? And the guy, "Yeah, those are my boys." He says, "Really? Okay." He said, "Well, what would you tell your children is worth dying for?" He says, "What are you talking about?" No, what if they had to die, when would you say better to die and do that than to live? And the man, you know, people don't normally talk like this. So the man was very taken aback at the question. He said, "Well, actually, you want to know the real answer? Nothing, nothing. You know, like Bob Marley, run away and live another day, right? Why? Okay, so you're embarrassed, but so what? Just get away, just survive. Nothing's worth dying for." So the rabbi said to him, "Well, that's very funny. Because when you fathered these children, sired, when these children were born, the only thing you are giving them is they're going to die. So what you're really telling your children when you have a child is there's something greater than death. There's something that even though we are all going to die, it's worth it. It's worth dying for." And what is that? What is worth dying for? Money? Power? You know, when I grew up, I can only see your names. I don't know if there's anybody in this class even close to my age. I'm sort of like a dinosaur, I guess, among you. But when I grew up in a period of time in America, we were known as hippies. My hair was like down to here. I used to go to all these rock concerts like Woodstock and so on and so on. And it was a time of like, either you were like really a hippie or you got really into money. And they made a t-shirt. I remember this in 1970 something, somebody made a t-shirt and it said, "The person with the most amount of things when they die wins." It was a joke. It was if to say, you're so busy getting, buying, getting, buying, buying, getting, taking. It's as if you think you're like racing with other people. "Oh, look, that person died at 40. Haha, I made it to 50. Haha, I made it to 60. It's not a race. Nobody dies younger or older than you. In fact, nobody dies except you. Each person has their own life. Each person has the amount of time. One of the greatest rabbis of all times was known as the Ramah. He lived in the 1400s in Europe. He died at the age of 33, and he wrote 33 of the most important books in Judaism in his lifetime. So it's not a question of how long you live. It's a question of how meaningful you live. And if you think life is all about just getting things, guess what? Nobody takes these things with them. And that's why somebody else came out with another t-shirt the next year. And that t-shirt said, "The person with the most amount of things when they die still dies." Certainly in heaven, they're not impressed. They're not impressed with a Bentley in heaven. Seriously? Really? Seriously? You think that in heaven, "Hey, I had a Bentley." Who cares? But you go up to heaven, "Hey, I fed poor people. Hey, I saw somebody without clothes. Hey, I saw somebody getting beaten up and I jumped in and stopped the fight." Wow. Guess what kind of reception that brings in the higher worlds? Because that means you're a higher person. You're a person who deserves to be in a higher world because you made yourself as a higher person. So therefore, in this experience then of birth and life and what we do with our life, there are milestones. For example, which is also interesting, in Jewish law, a child is considered born the minute he or she moves his head to the outer chamber. Not even when the head comes out of the mother, while it's still in the mother, but the downward movement has begun. That is also called a birthing process. Now, when the baby is born, according to the Talmud, I have never had a chance to check this out. If there are any midwives in the class, it'd be interesting to know what you have found out. But the Talmud says that a baby boy is born with a face down, and a baby girl is born with her face up. It would just be interesting if somebody has ever actually looked at that or not, but it could maybe just be a metaphor, but it's a very interesting kind of an observation. A baby born in the 8th month, God forbid, according to the Talmud, has almost no chance of surviving. But in the 7th month or less, or 9th month, they do. Of course, as among the Jews, on the 8th day, the Jewish boy is performed circumcision. I know that in Islam, there is circumcision on a woman, but in the Jewish perspective, that's considered a mutilation of the body. Whereas male circumcision is not considered it because the part of the man's organ which is removed is not an integral part of his body. And the reason this is because the whole purpose of creation is for a human being to be partner with God. So therefore, God, so to speak, left something unfinished on the male body so that the male could participate in being a creator of life. And the reason it is done on the 8th day, leaving aside biological issues of the nervous system and at what point the synapses are fully activated, but leaving that aside, the 8th day always represents the day which is above time and space, because there's only a 7-day week, and the 8th day is beyond time and space. So the circumcision is a way of tattooing, in a kosher way, one saying, I am joined to the time and space beyond this world. I am in this world, but I am not of this world. Then, of course, comes another moment in our lives, Jewish life, which is called the bat, which means daughter, or bar, which is Aramaic for the word ben, mitzvah, when a child becomes an adult. And a girl becomes an adult before a boy. Now, it's very interesting. I know we live in a world today where people can no longer tell what gender they are, or there maybe might be both and all the rest of that. But for somebody who was born and raised before that time in history, I know when I grew up as a kid, you saw clearly that little girls were so much wiser than little boys. Even the fact that little girls were playing with dolls and building homes where kids were just, stabbing each other with sticks, boys that is. So you see that the girl would become much more mature faster than the boy. Why is this? So it's very interesting. When, according to Jewish mysticism, when man and woman, Adam and Eve, were created, they were created as one, back to back. And then they were separated and they were brought together. But on a certain level, while as man, meaning Adam, was made from the earth, woman was made from man. So that means, just like in software, if you have Windows 10, it's nothing compared to today's Windows. Each time the software is the newer number, it's a more advanced, better program. So the fact that the woman was created at a higher state of evolution, that she was created out of a human body, means that she's one step closer to an angel, whereas the male body was created from the earth. So he has much more to do to elevate. That's why in Jewish life, a man, meaning a male, has many more commandments that he has to do than a woman, for two reasons. One, he has much further to climb to evolve than a woman who understands these things intuitively, naturally. And a woman, because she has a menstrual cycle, she has her period, similar to the moon that comes and goes, a monthly thing, she is naturally more in tune with creation. She has some clock that's built into her that allows her to realize a much greater relationship to creation than the man who is, in a certain level, divorced from that. The Mishnah teaches about the various ages of life. I just want to go through them briefly. It says that 5 years old is normally in Jewish education when a child begins to go to school. By the time he's in 10 years old, he's now able to learn more complicated information, which means if he's a Jewish boy, by the time he's 15, he will already be studying the Talmud, not necessarily the people's Talmud, but the Talmud. By the time he is 18 years old, he is ready to get married. Like, really, like, why wait? By the time he is 20 years old, he should already be beginning his career. By the time he is 30 years old, he is at the peak of his strength. At 40 years old, has reached a level of understanding. At 50 years old, has reached the level of giving good advice to others. At 60 years old, should be recognized as a member of the elders, meaning the leaders of the community. At 70 years old is considered a ripe old age. And 80 years old represents special strength. But at 90 years old, he will probably be bent over. And at 100 years old, he might be as if he's already left the world. So that's, in a certain sense, just a sort of a cycle of life. But it doesn't necessarily represent each individual in any way, shape, or form, but it gives a little bit of a contrast to that. Well, just as another thing, of course, at the end of all of that comes a person who is now left the world. There are actually, if I remember correctly, there are, Talmud says, I could be wrong. It says, I don't remember. The Talmud says there are, I think, 400 something different ways a person can die. The Talmud says that the worst death is compared to a thorn, like a rose thorn, pulled through cotton. It rips, it tears, yanks. And the highest form of death is called a kiss from heaven. And the kiss from heaven is like an eyelash being pulled out of milk. What does that mean? Very similar to the world of acupressure points and meridians. I think we once talked about this a long time ago when talking about Jewish tefillin, how they relate to the 12, which become 13 meridians, and there's 613 contact points and so on. So the soul touches the body in 613 points. If the soul's relationship with the body is a holy one, a person uses his hand to help the poor, to give charity, to wipe away a tear, to hug somebody, as opposed to push or steal or punch, same hand. If they use the hand in a holy way, then the soul in the hand sits in the body like a hand in a glove. So when you take off a glove, the hand just comes out. But if the soul of the hand was used to improperly abuse the rights of living in this world, then the hand is stuck in the physical world. So now when it's time to pull the soul out, it's stuck. It's stuck and it doesn't want to go. and it tries to hold on. It's so stuck in this world, it can't let go. It can't fly. It can't breathe. It's horrified. It's scared. It's confused. It never learned the lessons of life. That becomes like the two bookends of what leaving this world is seen as a kind of a symbolism. King Solomon said in the book of Mishlei, I think you call Mishlei in English Proverbs, but in the book of Mishlei, King Solomon says there are three things that are never satisfied. One is the grave. The grave never rejected a dead person and said there's no room, right? It can be like a very funny scene. You know, they come to the funeral and they're in the cemetery and there's the hole and they put him in and somehow or another he pops out and they put him in and he pops out and like they hear, I'm sorry, that's it. The earth says, I've got enough dead people here. For the last 4,000 years, I got billions of dead people. I don't want any more dead people. So Thomas said that's never going to happen. The earth is always ready to accept another person. And in the same way, the womb is always ready to give birth, always ready to bring a new child into the world. And the third is that the earth will never say it's tired of producing food. It will always produce more food. And somebody also added that even fire, when fire burns, it never says, oh, that's enough. Fire will burn as much as it possibly can. It'll never be satisfied. Okay. Now, here's a very interesting Gemara. We're going to start to wrap this all together here. The Gemara says, it seems as if it was a mistake. The Talmud uses the word, instead of referring to the womb, it uses the word tomb. The tomb is a grave. And suddenly the Talmud refers to a mother's belly as a grave rather than as a womb. So before we get into the Talmud, I'm going to tell you a little joke, cute story about this. There are two babies, twins, inside their mommy. And they're having a big argument. And one of them is telling the other one, you know what? This is not what it's all about. Where we are, this isn't it. We're going to leave here and we're going to go out of mommy and there's going to be life on the other side of the womb. And the other baby says, are you crazy? Are you crazy? When you leave here, you're dead. This is it. This is life. There's no life after this. This is it. So one baby saying, no, 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 this is not it. There's life after the womb. And the other baby saying, no, 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 this is all there is. All of a sudden, the baby who says there's life after the womb is born. And outside the mommy are all the family standing around as the baby is born. And they're all going, yay, congratulations, wow, wonderful. But the little brother who's back inside is going, oh, crying because his brother's dead. So the same idea. You have two people here in this world. And one person says to his friend, you know what? This is not all there is. This is something, we got to deal with it, but we're going to leave here, and that's where it's going to really be happening. And the other one says, are you kidding? Are you nuts? This is it. This is all you're going to ever be, and all you're ever going to get is here, now, live it. And of course, the man who says there's more suddenly dies. And his friend cries because his friend died. But in heaven, everyone's welcoming him. Woo! You made it. You got out of the swimming pool. You're back in the real infinite universe where you belong. So that, in one way, is how the womb can be a tomb, because it's sort of a death from one stage to another. And in fact, in our lives are filled with little deaths. Not just the death, physical death of people we know and love, but death of experience. You're no longer in high school. You're no longer in college. You're no longer in that relationship with that man or in that relationship with that girl. You're no longer in that company. You're no longer doing the army. These are little debts. These are experiences that we go in and we come out. The question is, how do we come out of these experiences is what makes our lives worth living. You know, a person might be afraid to jump into the water because they think they're going to come out a fish or a mermaid. But when you come out of the water, you come out refreshed. So when you jump into the experience of life, if you come out, you can come out and have learned so much from that, that you now become that person magnified even more and even greater. So here, let's just listen for one more minute. What did the Talmud mean by that? So sages were sending the following message. One second, where this is here. Oh, look at that. I didn't even read it. And I saw it was this. It was the very story I told about the two babies in the womb. That was the message. The message was, how do we relate to what we see? But the bottom line of what the Talmud says is that a person is born naked, without any clothing, so to speak, and dies naked. So the Talmud is trying to point out what are the things that you can take with you. And those are the things that you put into your soul, into your name. Those are the things that will live with you as you live forever. So here's the last idea I would like to just share. And that is, all of us made a vow when we were about to be born to be good people. And none of us, and I'm going to put myself ahead of all of you, have fulfilled that vow. We have all made mistakes. We have all screwed up. We have all ruined things. Any one of us, if you look back over your shoulder, you will find a big garbage pile of things that we made a mess of. And you know what? That's okay. Why? Because that's what people do. People make mistakes. They even make intentional mistakes. People screw up. That's what it means to be a person. That's why in Judaism, when we talk about the original sin in the Garden of Eden, it was not the eating of the fruit. Why? Because to screw up is okay. It's human. So what was the original sin from at least our perspective? The original sin was not saying, I'm sorry for having screwed up, for not taking responsibility, rather to try to blame somebody else. Well, they're the reason. That's the one who's wrong, not me. That's a sin. The sin is to step up and take responsibility and say, hey, you know what? I've made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. What can I do to make it better? How can I fix it? You know, I once told somebody that the real definition of a court case, of what it should be like for two righteous people who go to court. Normally, two people are arguing over money. They come into court, and one guy says to the judge, he owes me my money. I want my money. And the other guy says, no, he owes me money. I want my money. That's what we always are familiar with. Imagine this case. Two people walk into court, and one says, I owe him money, and he won't take it from me. And the other guy says, yeah, that's because he doesn't owe me money. I owe him money, and I want the court to demand that he takes money from me. Imagine that. Instead of one guy saying, give me, give me, give me, give me, one guy saying, let me give, let me give, let me give. And why are they doing that? Because they want to do the right thing. If the money is not their money, they don't want to touch it. It's like touching fire. Why would you touch fire? You're going to get burned. If you're stealing another person's money, no matter how much you steal, you will regret it forever once you leave this world. So nobody would ever want to take something that wasn't theirs. I remember when I used to be in yeshiva, which is a school for where religious Jewish people learn Torah, there was a guy who left his wallet with almost $2,000 cash in the wallet. He left it in the main study hall and nobody touched it. Nobody touched it. There were 1,000 opportunities at night when everybody was eating. It was plenty of chances to steal it. Nobody touched it because more important than money was my self-value. I don't want to poison my soul by stealing other money. In fact, I'll just tell you another story. There was a rabbi who actually was a very big influence on my becoming involved in Torah Judaism in 1974. And his grandson is we call in the more religious circles, the Rebbe, not the rabbi, but the Rebbe. Very, very holy man. And at one point in time, I'm sorry. Yeah. You have to wait, middle of the class right now. And okay. I hope you can still hear me. I've just lost. Can you still hear me? Yeah, you can. All right.
Yeah, we can hear.
You can. Okay. So a very wealthy man whose name doesn't make a difference came from Canada. He came into the rabbi's house and he had a suitcase of $100,000 in cash. And he put the suitcase on the rabbi's eating table. Let's say it was Tuesday. I don't remember that detail. And he said to the rabbi, I want you to be my messenger, and I want you to give this money to charity in my name. And the rabbi, and I don't know how you do this, but he did it, or at least he said he did it. He looked at the money, and by looking at the money, he could see, he said, this is not clean money. Doesn't mean it was stolen money. But he could see there was something in the spiritual air around the money that was not holy. And the rabbi said, no, please, I don't want this money. Take the suitcase and do with it however you want. And the man, who was a very religious man, said, what are you talking about? I don't steal money. This is very clean money. I'm leaving it here. And he walked out and left the money. Walked out, left the suitcase with $100,000 bills, which was a lot of money in 1980, still a lot of money, but more so then. And he refused to take the suitcase back. The wife of the Rebbe, Friday, as Shabbat is starting to come into the world, the wife calls the wife of this man. And she says, your husband's suitcase has been sitting on our table all week. Nobody will touch this suitcase. Can you please come and take it so that we can prepare our table for Shabbat? Because when you love holiness and what's right and what you can be, then money is a very big blessing. It's a wonderful tool. You can do tremendous good things with it, but you can also bury yourself with it. So as we take this oaths in our lives, the Talmud asks, how can we remember our oaths? And the Talmud gives a very, very humble suggestion. It says that it says a person should, in Hebrew we call it tshuva, a person should recapture their pure essence the day before they die. And God forbid, if a person was lying in a hospital and they knew they were about to die, they're not going to be thinking about who won the football game. They're not going to be thinking about how I can make another dollar. And I have a friend of mine who worked in one of the most tragic hospitals in New York City called Sloan Kettering for people with terminal advanced cancer. but you got to be very rich to get in there. And he was the head of the psychology department. He was the head psychiatrist there. Simon Wine is his name, from Australia. And he once told me, he said, you know what? I got all kinds of people here. I got people from China who own huge factories. I've got movie stars from Hollywood. I've got Brazilians who own a tremendous amount of forests. All different kind of people, all different backgrounds. But I never heard one of them say, I wish I spend more time in the office. They never said that. They said, why didn't I spend more time with my children? Why didn't I spend more time reading a really important book? Why didn't I spend more time with me, myself? How did I really get to know myself? So when a person approaches death, it creates an incredible value of life. So the Talmud says, how can you fix yourself the day before you die when you don't know the day you're going to die? And the Talmud answers, exactly the point. Nobody knows when they're going to die. Do you think a person, God forbid, who's killed in a car accident, woke up that morning, woohoo, I'm going to die in a car accident? No, they woke up, she put on her makeup, she put on her lipstick, she got all ready, she looked in the mirror, she was on her way to, boom. Nobody knows. So therefore, if we're alive today, it could be the last day of our life. So in a positive way, we could use that, not to become depressed, God forbid, not to be sad, but to wake up and smell how rich you are. Even if you don't have money, how rich you are to be alive and what you can do with it. And by doing that, that is how you really celebrate your birthday. You take the voyage that you began when you came out of your mother, and you make your mother proud because of who you become. You make your family proud because of who you are. But most important, you make yourself proud because you know that you really lived and did the right thing. And to do that, then you're not afraid of dying because you're living. And that's why, and we'll end here, that's why it says that very few people who are alive are living because they're already dead. They're just moving vegetables. They're eating another thing. They're having sex with another person. They're buying another car. They're dead. They're just moving, but they're dead. Very few people are alive. They're really growing and developing. And we all can be that. We don't have to be dead. And guess what? The reverse is true. Not everybody who dies is dead. If you really illuminate your name and make it, when people say your name behind your back, they smile. They don't go, oh, that guy, that person, oof. They go, wow, oh, you met her? Wow, she's wonderful, isn't she? That's the vibration, the light that comes out of you and goes into other people. And that makes them become light because they want to be somebody like you. They want people to say good things behind their back. But that doesn't really matter. You want to look in the mirror and the person you see you love because you really love that person because that person is you and you are becoming a wonderful soul of light. And if you do, death isn't going to put that light out. Death is no more than leaving the womb. It's just going to help you move into a much greater world than the life after here. And that makes the birthday worth celebrating. So on that note, I'm going to have to excuse myself. If there are any questions, Dot promised that she would answer all of them afterwards.